Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Esslinger with the Illinois Department of Transportation, Bureau of Safety Programs and Engineering. I want to welcome everyone to the Mini Enforcement Grantee meeting and talk about the upcoming grant and and learn a little bit more about what we're trying to do with the grant. So before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. The meeting is scheduled for 90 minutes until 11:30. We may or may not need all 90 minutes, but just in case. So also, if you have any questions during the presentation, please place your questions in the chat and we will address those at the end of the presentation. And this presentation is also being recorded and it will be placed on the IDOT grants website and the law enforcement liaison website. So it'll be two locations where we will have this recording of the presentation. Next slide, please. So the overview, we're going to talk about the meeting purpose and general information about the grant program. We're going to talk about the goals and objectives that are laid out for the grant. We're going to talk about the 205 data collection form, and this is a report, progress report. Basically, every time you conduct a enforcement campaign, you will need to complete a BSPE 205 data collection form. We will also discuss the BSP 500 step claim form. Everyone wants to get paid, so we want to make sure that we go through the claim form on how to submit it, what information is required, and to get you reimbursed based off your activity. We're going to talk about the BOBS 2832 periodic report form. That is a Grant Accountability and Transparency Act form that you will need to complete for the grant period, and we will discuss that also. We're also going to talk about electronic submittal of claims and financial information and how all that works. And then there's also resources on IDOT's website that you can reference if you have questions or throughout the grant year that you can go to on our website. I also want to mention that the grant agreements are being emailed to the authorizing representatives that was listed in the grant application. The project directors are being CC'd on the email also when it's being sent to the authorizing rep. So the grant agreements are being emailed out via DocuSign. So the authorizing rep will receive an email and so they will need to open that and sign, and there's instructions there. But so the authorizing rep and then the project director will be CC'd on that email. So those are starting to filter out. And so we should be ready to go by May 16th. Next slide. So the purpose of the meeting, we want to make sure that you understand and have the tools to successfully implement the mini enforcement grant program. So again, the purpose of this meeting, we're going to talk about things that you need to reference and use throughout the grant year and to help you be successful. Also, we want you to ask questions so we can clarify any issues or things that you're not sure about. This is a time that we can do that. Also, the LELs, law enforcement liaisons, will be conducting orientation meetings with you. And so if you think of something after this presentation, you can ask your LEL when they conduct the orientation meeting. And the third dot point there is, we see you as ambassadors for highway safety in Illinois. You're on the front line for highway safety. You're out conducting enforcement on highway safety laws for the state of Illinois. So, we treat you as ambassadors. We value your partnership And we look forward to a successful program. Next slide. So the IDOT BSP grant team, again, we have a lot of staff that we want you to use to help you be successful. So you are going to be assigned a grant administrator, and once you get your grant agreement, you will see that in Exhibit C of your grant agreement, who your grant administrator is. We also have program coordinators. So in Illinois, we have an impaired driving coordinator, an occupant protection coordinator. So any questions or things that come up, regarding impaired driving or occupant protection, child passenger safety, we have those resources, our coordinators in place to help you with that. You will also be working with a law enforcement liaison that will help you with the operational side of the grant. We also have the Grants Accountability and Transparency Act, the GATA contact here in BSPE. So any issues that you have with GATA, I know a lot of you, you submitted your application through Amplifund. So Aaron Link is our contact, our GATA contact. So questions that may come up with GATA related, we can refer you to Aaron, and he does a great job for us. And then we also have our finance unit, our BSPE finance unit. So they're the ones that will process the claims and send those on for reimbursement. So again, you have a large support system here with this grant. We're just not sending you a grant agreement and say, good luck. We're here to help you, support you, and want you to be successful. So next slide, please. So here's my contact information. If you have any questions, moving forward, I do have around, I think, 6 agencies, many enforcement agencies as a grant administrator. So you'll be hearing from me. But again, that is my contact, and I look forward to working with everyone and have a successful enforcement campaign here. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Scott Christensen. So Scott.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm glad you were all able to make it today. And we're here, just so you know, to really help you be successful in the administration of this grant. And so we're going to go over a lot of the things that Steve talked about. And first and foremost is going to be your grant team. These are the people, the grant administrators and the law enforcement liaisons are going to be the individuals that you're going to have as primary contacts related to this grant. The grant administrators have overall administration of the grant and all final approvals for requests or changes or modifications. They basically handle the administrative aspect of the grant. So you'll be working with them for any items that would deal with claims and any other overall administration. Each of you are going to have a law enforcement liaison and a grant administrator assigned to you. The law enforcement liaisons are all retired law enforcement officers, and we've worked with IDOT and with traffic grants, and we will be working with you basically on the operational aspects of the grant. We work with those grant administrators to help you. We can do as law enforcement liaisons some approvals if any are needed, if the grant administrator is not available. And again, we deal with a lot of the operational aspects of the grant. Here is a list of the grant administrators and their contact information. Again, each one of you are going to be assigned one of these grant administrators. That will be listed in your uniform grant agreement under Exhibit C, under contact information. This is a list of the law enforcement liaisons. We will also be working with you and will be assigned to all of the mini grants. One of the things that I would like to mention that Steve had mentioned was that in addition to the IDOT website, the LELs have a website listed below. And you have, there's a lot of good information there, aside from the grant, that you'll be able to access and help you be more successful in all of your traffic safety efforts, whether it's grant related or not. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. So we're going to go over now the mini grant, basically an overview, goals, objectives that are related to this grant. When you get your grant, your uniform grant agreement, which are currently being sent out, all of the important information that you're going to need, we want you to go ahead and read the whole grant. Don't just have it and skim through it. You should actually take some time to read that grant and to take a look at it to understand the whole aspect of it. But the areas of the grant that are going to be primary of your concern are going to be listed in the exhibits. And those exhibits, you're going to have A through E, and they're each going to have a different aspect of the grant for you to look at. I would absolutely recommend that you guys read through all of these exhibits to understand the grant and what's going to be required of you. As Steve mentioned, one of the things with this orientation meeting is that there is a checklist form that's going to have to be completed. This form will be worked with your law enforcement liaison. After this meeting, this webinar, the law enforcement liaison assigned to you is going to reach out to you if they haven't already. And they're going to go over this form with you through this checklist, and you will be then asked to sign it electronically and then send it back along with all the other data that covers some of the information, except a little more detailed when you meet with your law enforcement liaison. The checklist, this BSPE 26S form, becomes part of your approved highway safety agreement. So you'll have a copy of this provided to you, and you need to keep that with your paperwork, either hard copy and or electronically. One of the things that we want to cover in this list, this checklist, is anytime that you're going to have a correspondence with a law enforcement liaison, a grant administrator, what we'd like you to do is put your project number in the subject line. That identifies you specifically and your grant project number helps us to make sure that the correspondence gets linked up with the appropriate grant or your grant. All of your questions need to be directed towards your grant administrator and or your law enforcement liaison. Steve Esslinger is the safety projects manager, but the direct communication should be through your GA and LEL and not to Steve. If there's any change in your authorizing representative, because things change, and or project director, we ask you that you're required to make notification to your safety grant administrator with a CC to your LEL through an email. There's no form to fill out. It's just basically saying that if somebody retires or gets promoted, they change positions, and a new person has been assigned to that duty, that you notify us so that we make sure that we have their contact information and work with the person who's actually managing the grant. One of the things that we're going to ask for, and the LELs will be asking for this, is that we need a copy of your seatbelt use policy. So what you might want to do in between now and when your LEL reaches out to you is if you can obtain a hard copy of that, it would make it a little bit easier. You would email that to your law enforcement liaison, and then we'll forward that to the grant administrator and put that into your file, your permit file. Again, it was mentioned, the LELs are going to follow up after this webinar to gain the signed copy of the BSPE 26. We will answer then at that point any questions or anything else that you have related to the grant. I'd like to discuss now the campaigns. The grant it runs from May 16th is when the start of it is, runs through September 30th. There are 5 enforcement campaign opportunities that you could have put in for. 3 of those we are identifying as mandatory, and there are 2 optional. The mandatory campaigns listed coincide with the year-long STEP grant, and the mandatory campaigns have a specific focus. The Memorial Day is occupant protection, Independence Day is impaired driving, and Labor Day is impaired driving. The optional speed is going to occur in July, and distracted driving is going to be in September. The mandatory campaign protocols set up for this grant is that you must participate in at least one of the mandatory campaigns that are listed in the focus areas. What that means is that the mandatory campaign listed for Memorial Day, if that is the one that you're choosing, that you would need to participate at least in the occupant protection aspect of that. If Independence Day was your chosen mandatory, then you would have to participate in impaired driving. Now, you could, in any of these circumstances, participate and do enforcement in both occupant protection and impaired driving. That being said, you still are going to make sure that if you were only able to do one during that campaign, even though you put in for 2 different ones, the one you participated in for your mandatory is in the focus area. Now all of you should have recognized this. This is the worksheet that you guys filled out to determine what you were going to put in for and what campaigns you were going to participate in and at what level. So as you see here, the Memorial Day is highlighted along with the Independence Day and Labor Day in those focus areas. Remember that you can participate in both, but if you're only going to do occupant protection as an example, and you were going to do that for the Memorial Day, Independence Day, and Labor Day campaign, that you must participate in occupant protection for Memorial Day. And the same is true as if you were only going to do impaired driving. You could do that for Memorial Day, but your Independence Day and Labor Day, one of those 2 would have to be for impaired driving. So here's an example of the campaigns that show, like, as Memorial Day, this agency is doing both occupant protection and impaired driving. And they have chosen to do occupant protection for Labor Day and Independence Day. They were just doing impaired driving. So they would meet the requirement for the mandatory. One of the things that I wanted to mention to you is that the form that you filled out, this is a working template that you can allocate funds that you maybe thought you were going to use. As an example, if you thought at the time you filled this out, Memorial Day, you were going to try and do impaired driving, and as it turns out, you're not going to be able to do that. This is not a use it or lose it type of grant. We want you to be able to utilize all the funds that you've been funded for. So you have the ability to utilize and move, as an example, the impaired driving Memorial Day funds down to Labor Day. Even though you didn't put in for it on your initial worksheet, It doesn't preclude you from taking those funds and moving it to um, another campaign, either to do one that you didn't put in for, or as an example, if you weren't able to do the Memorial Day impaired driving, you could move those hours to, let's say, speed, and bolster that and move those hours and increase those. So the desired outputs that we have for the campaign are pretty consistent across all types. The average, what we want is an average, a minimum of one enforcement contact for every 60 minutes of patrol. And that's different from one per every 60 minutes. We don't want officers to feel compelled to write a enforcement contact as they're maybe running out of time in a particular hour. If they don't see anything, then they don't write it. But over a 4-hour campaign or a detail that they'd be working, there is an expectation that they would have a total of 4 enforcement contacts on average. An enforcement contact is considered an enforcement action that results in a citation or a local ordinance cite ticket. When we are tracking these type of enforcement contacts, we do not want you on the forms, on the data forms, to include written warnings. To keep in mind with the high visibility enforcement aspect of these grants is that we would encourage you to do traffic stops, and a lot of them, but all of them do not have to result in a enforcement contact, citation, or ordinance ticket. So the desired outputs for the occupant protection, again, one enforcement contact for every 60 minutes. If you're doing occupant protection enforcement, we would like to see 30% of all the contacts that you make to be for occupant restraint violations. And those would be front or rear seat or a child passenger safety violation. For those of you and agencies that have a local ordinance for this violation, that local ordinance citation does count as an enforcement contact. With the occupant protection enforcement that you'll be doing, there is no time of day requirements for the occupant protection campaigns. So we'd like you to go out there and do your enforcement. If it turns out that it's all during the daytime hours, then that's fine. If it's daytime and nighttime, that'll work, or if it's all nighttime. But there are no restrictions one way or the other. Desired outputs for impaired driving, again, we want an average of one enforcement contact for every 60 minutes. We would like to see an average of one impaired driving arrest for every 15 hours of impaired driving enforcement. So you want to strive to reach that if at all possible. One of the things with the impaired driving is that there's a caveat that the officers that are conducting this enforcement must be trained in SFST and or have had a refresher in the past 4 years. Or if the officer has been ARIDE trained or they are a DRE, then in that case, they would qualify to be able to do the impaired driving enforcement. Impaired driving enforcement must be conducted between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m., 1800 to 0600. It doesn't preclude you from doing some enforcement during the day. You can do it. However, that being said, that can only be done by a person who's ARIDE trained or DRE trained officers, in which case you would have to get approval from your grant administrator and tell us the reason why you want to do it during the day. And then we would review that, and then we would give you approval, and then you could conduct during the day 0600 to 1800. If you're doing speed or you're funded for speed enforcement, again, you have the minimum one enforcement contact every 60 minutes. With speed and distracted driving, we are asking that 50% of all the enforcement contacts that you have be for speed if you're doing speed enforcement, and distracted driving if you're doing distracted driving enforcement. They should be for electronic use type violations. The law enforcement liaisons have a distracted driving violation list that they could provide you with. It's not just one or two things. There's, I think, 10 different types of violations. And if you ask your LEL, they can provide you with that you can give to your officers that are doing that type of enforcement. Again, with both of these campaigns, no time of day requirements for speed and or distracted driving. As part of your grant, you're going to be required to do a pre and a post press release. The press releases can be done in a number of different ways, and they need to be done for each of the campaigns that you're doing. So if you've been funded for 3 campaigns, we would like to see 3 pre and post press releases. A press release would qualify if you do Facebook posts. A lot of agencies, that's how they're doing it these days. They're not, doing it the old-fashioned way. They post it on Facebook and other type of social media. That is acceptable. If you take and post a press release on Facebook, we would ask that you take a screenshot of that post, and that is what you would end up providing as your proof that it was actually done to your grant administrator. The pre and the post press releases do not have to be done and sent in as they're done. You can do a pre, and then when the campaign is over and you do your post, you can send the pre and the post to your grant administrator at the same time. You would be sending your data sheet, your BSPE 205. What we would like you to do is IDOT, BSPE, the grants, provide a template or press examples for each one of the STEP grant campaigns. Your mini grant campaigns mirror at the same time the different campaigns. And so these templates for media press examples will be posted on the IDOT website for you to use. The only difference is going to be if you're participating in the September distracted driving campaign, you will have a separate media template that's going to be provided and posted on the IDOT webpage that'll specifically deal with that in September. The STEP grants distracted driving is in April. This is in September, so there'll be a separate one for you. You can go to the IDOT website listed there on the screen, or another way to get to it is in a Google search. If you type in Traffic Safety Grants Illinois, it will provide you with some responses. The first one typically will be the link that'll take you directly to the IDOT website. You also can do your own press release if you want to add your own local statistics and data. You can do that. What we would ask you to do is to make sure that there's an IDOT credit line, basically stating that this enforcement was funded in part or all by an IDOT grant, and then send that to your grant administrator for approval. They'll need to look at that and approve it before you go ahead and post it. What I'd like to do now is go over the grants forms that you're going to be required to do or to use for this grant. To access these forms, they are all going to be posted on the IDOT website. And you need to do this primarily use Google Chrome. Don't use an older version of Google of that search engine. It will accept some of the other ones that are out there, but Google Chrome seems to be the one that, when it works, that seems to be the best one for you to use. Again, go to the Traffic Safety Grants Illinois website. You will then end up going to the website, and there is a spot for the grants for a drop down, and you will then be able to go ahead and get these forms. There are three forms that you're going to be focusing on. One is the BSPE 205. That's a data collection form. The most recent version is 913 of 24. Your 500 form is a claim form. Most recent is 10/4/24, and the Bob's report, which is the periodic financial reporting form. Most recent one is 1/2 of 24. We want you to use the most recent forms. So when you go and get onto the IDOT website, this is what you're going to see. So when you get onto the website, you're going to see off to the left a column that has a bunch of choices. What you need to do is click onto the traffic safety grants drop down, and you will see three options: apply, forms, and resources. So in this case, if you want to get to the forms, you're going to click on the forms, and it will take you to this page. This lists all the forms that IDOT is currently using to do reporting. Again, you will be focused on three of those forms. It does make reference that you can open it directly by using Internet Explorer. Do not use Internet Explorer. It's not valid anymore. It's not supported. And although the other ones that they say it might work on, the Mozilla and Firefox can work. Now, what could happen when you do click on that is there is a potential high likelihood that you are going to see one of these two warnings that are going to pop up on your screen. This, because of whatever reason, depending on the server that you're using, this is not a problem necessarily with your computer, although it kind of indicates or lends you to believe that it's maybe an older version of Adobe Reader, or that there's some problem with a version of Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge. By and large, if you get this notice, there is a workaround to be able to download these forms. This is the workaround. What you will do is you will take your cursor, you will hover over the form that you want on the IDOT website, and you will right-click that. When you right-click it, you are going to see this drop-down appear. This drop-down then will provide you two opportunities to download the particular form that you want. You can either download the file, the linked file, or you download the file, you can rename it, and it typically will download that to your desktop. Once it is on your desktop, you will be able to go ahead and double click it, and the form will open up for you. If it doesn't, and you still have a problem, then contact your law enforcement liaison and or grant administrator, and then we will work to try and figure out a way to get those forms to you. We can maybe email them to you, but there'll be a way you can get the forms if this doesn't work. What I'd like to do now is I'm going to go over the BSPE 205. This is your data collection form. So this form, it's a tracker and an evaluation tool of your enforcement activity. This form provides sections for you to record the amount of total hours that your agency worked for a campaign, any written contacts that you've had, your media efforts, and then there's a section for other important enforcement information that you want to include in this data report. The reason and how is this used, IDOT uses this and BSPE uses this for a couple of reasons. We want to ensure that the objectives and goals that are listed in the grant are in fact being met. We use it as a quality check also against the BSPE 500 claim form. We want to make sure, and it has to, the 205 and the 500 have to match. The information, the data, and the hours have to match exactly, and then this form can be used as a check against your claim to ensure that there is not a problem so that that claim does not get kicked back to you. And then we also use it to calculate statistics and take a look at what type of activity, what kind of work was done and completed as a result. So this is what the form looks like. It has information for the agency and campaign information, your hours, number of vehicles stopped, your enforcement contacts, any arrest information and data that you have, your media, Additional comments, name of the project itself, the project director. The big thing that we really find and have found is that in many occasions or in some occasions, you don't use the most up-to-date form. As you look at the form in the lower right-hand corner, you will see the most up-to-date revision. We recommend that rather than save, if you're doing multiple campaigns, rather than save the 205 that you used for the Memorial Day campaign, don't just reuse it and assume that it hasn't been changed. Anytime any small little change or revision happens to it, that will change. You may not even notice it, but if you put in or try and turn in an older version, it will be sent back and ask you to redo it. Our goal is to have you touch this only once. Send it in and it gets completed. So what you're going to find, this is the upper portion of the 205, is when you first look at it, you're going to see there's some things that are missing and some boxes that you have to check in order for the form to fully activate. And what I mean by that, if you look to the left, you'll see there's an FFY. This form is used for multiple years. And so we want to make sure that the form you're using has the correct year, which would be FFY 25. That's this current grant year. This grant also, if you look at the patrol hours for daytime and nighttime, depending on that, it's going to total where it says total hours, so it'll total for you. It's automatic. So when you check the FFY 25 box, you will see the campaign and enforcement type boxes propagate. So what you'll do then depending on what you're doing the campaign, when you click that down button, you will see a list of different campaigns. Again, all of those campaigns that you'll be working, except for the distracted driving in September, will be listed on this drop down. So in this case, what you'll do is you'll see there's Memorial Day. This is going to be the first one that's going to occur. And when you click on Memorial Day, you will see the enforcement type come up. You have two choices. You can be doing occupant protection and impaired driving, or you would be doing just one or the other for that. One of the things that I want to mention to you is that if you are doing two different types of enforcement for the campaign, you will need to do two BSPE 205s and two separate claims, one for impaired driving, one for occupant protection. So just remember that it's not a combined data sheet or claim. You'll have to do one for each one. Once you click on, in this case, you click on occupant protection, the dates section to the right is predetermined and you'll get that notice. You are not going to have to fill in any dates. That will automatically occur. So the only, again, as we mentioned, the only difference is going to be the distracted driving campaign. And what you will do for that, if you are participating in that in September, you will click on that drop down and there's one option called additional enforcement. You will click on additional enforcement and then go down to the options for additional and you'll see there's distracted driving and you will then click on that. Off to the right, then you will see from and to. Those are the dates assigned to that campaign that you will be required to input in there if you are participating in the distracted driving in September. The bottom portion of the form looks like this. We are going to track not a whole lot of things. We basically are tracking the Fatal 4 type violations. It's seatbelts, occupant protection violations. We are doing speeding, distracted driving, and impaired driving. So you'll see it breaks out on the different types of impaired driving arrests. Also, all of your traffic arrests, suspended, revoked, no DLs, or criminal arrests, which would be misdemeanors, felonies, fugitives, anybody you arrest on a warrant, will be logged into there. All other enforcement, regardless of what the citation is for, will be logged in as an other citation for that. One of the things that I want to remind you is that if you do make a DUI arrest, whether it's during occupant protection or not, is that there is only one notation for the arrest. We understand that in an impaired driving arrest, there could be an A1 and an A2 charge, which individually that could be considered 2 DUI arrests. That is one incident, one DUI arrest. If you write them for the A2 and then you write them for the A1 would go into the other column. You have a media portion there. Anything you do media-wise that you're a part of, just indicate how many you've done. And then in the additional notes, what we would like you to do is anything that happened that was of consequence. Maybe you stopped somebody and you got guns, drugs, recovered stolen property, anything like that. We want to know about it. Additionally, this is where we would like you, and I'll talk about this in a minute. If an officer has to come off of the grant and they have to assist patrol, this would be an area that you would indicate that an officer took time away from the grant to assist a patrol officer on a call and then came back onto the grant. And that just indicates that the officer did do that. So when you complete the 205 form, you have 14 days after the campaign to submit this form. The way you can do that is you would complete the form. At the top of the form, there's a little tab for email. You click on that. It will then propagate this DOT data address. It will automatically come up, and then the form will automatically be sent to where it needs to go at IDOT. We would ask that you would CC your law enforcement liaison. It's important for us to know what activity, because we will follow that and then work with you as a reference to assist you if you have any issues or questions that we would have, that we have to know that it's been put in. Again, this form should be sent digitally. So if for some reason you have a problem, if this form malfunctions on the email option, you can take this email address and send it from your own personal email. And it would go that way, and just make an attachment, which would be the form. You do not need to print it out. You do not need to sign it and scan it and send a copy. If you make a mistake, so let's say that you realize that with this form that you neglected to put some data in there, one of the officers was left off in their information, then at the top where you put your name in the form, we would ask you to put next to your name on that form, revised in caps. That way we know that that is the 205 that needs to be used for all these data entries and information. That would then get resent to this BSPE data again to the LEL. The 500 form. The BSPE 500 is a claim form that will be used for you to get reimbursed. This is a reimbursement grant. So you have to do the work. The officers have to be paid for that work through payroll. And then at that point, then this form gets submitted for reimbursement with IDOT. This form has different sections at the top, which is what you're going to primarily put your information in. Project number, your agency information. And then the second page of this form is going to have the specific information on the employees that worked the grant. The second page, default in the budget category at the top, is defaulted into personnel costs. If your agency has been funded and you were for indirect costs related to the grant, what you would need to do is check that box, in which case at the very bottom, you'll see there's a little area that will propagate for you to put in indirect costs to fill out. The data that's put on the second page automatically gets moved to the front where it says expended this period. It will automatically go there, whatever you list on this second page. So the top portion is what you're going to be concerned with completing. And this is an example of one that would be completed. Your claims, depending on the number, are sequential. So the first one that you put in for, if you were to do 2 enforcement types for the Memorial Day campaign, you would have to put in for 2 claims. It doesn't matter which one is which, but if you put occupant protection and that information first for the claim, that would be claim number 1. You would do that for impaired driving afterwards. That would be claim 2. And then whatever you did for the following ones, 3, 4, 5, that's how it would go. Make sure that you put the proper fiscal year, again, off to the right, click on FY25. You would put your agency and project number. Your project number will be listed on your grant. It's going to be an HS25 dash, and then there'll be 4 digits. You'll fill out all that information. On the drop down for the campaign, you will get the different campaign that, in this case, if you're looking at Labor Day, it'll propagate with the dates. You'll put in the type of enforcement, and then that use code automatically will fill. So you don't have to worry about where is that. You must check that BSPE 205. It has to be submitted for you to have your claim paid. So if for some reason you forgot to do that, if you sent this claimant, it's going to get kicked back to you. So make sure your 205 is completed and that that box is checked. When you're doing your claim, for it says approved budget, it's not the approved budget for the particular campaign that you're putting in for. It is for the total amount of your grant. So make sure that that's the number that you use. That will be the same number for all of your campaigns. The expended this period, that will what will delineate the amount of money for that campaign that you're being reimbursed for. You also have to check that certification box. And then at the bottom, you're going to do a digital signature. For those of you that know about digital signatures, if that freezes your form. So the thing that I would tell you is that you will need to make sure that you have everything right. You can work on this form, save it, pull it back up, and when you're ready to sign it, then go ahead and do that. Because this is a reimbursement grant, you'll see at the top, it says date prepared. You may have all the information to fill out this form completely prior to the payroll date. You need to use the payroll date and or after that as a prepared date. You can't have the prepared date prior to that, even though you can do it. So leave that blank, call up the form on the last day or the payroll date, put in the date, and then that's when you're going to go ahead and put it in there and submit it. Again, this is just a reminder for those of you that, when you check that box and you do the digital signature, it's going to freeze that. You want to check if you don't know how to do this or you're not set up to do it. It's not that hard. It's pretty easy. Check with your local IT person, and they should be able to help you set this up on your computer. If not, BSPE has a PowerPoint presentation under resources when you go to their page, which will allow you to see how to set this up yourself. It's not that difficult, but we really want you to use this digital way to submit the claim. That's the preferred way of doing it. The bottom portion of this form is for the BSPE personnel to use for their checking. The only thing I want to bring your attention to, though, is on the lower right-hand corner, you'll see there's like a number of hours. What you need to do is when you fill out this form, go down there and take a look at that and make sure that that claim number hours matches your 205. If it doesn't, you need to go back and rectify that and figure out where the problem is. If they don't match, your claim won't be paid, and we want to make sure that the hours worked are accurate. So second page, page 2 of the claim form. When you fill out the claim number, project number, dates covered on the first page, that will automatically fill onto the second page. In this case, what we're looking for is employee name. So we want to know who worked. And then we only want one entry per officer or deputy that worked it. Okay. We do not want multiple. If an officer worked 4 or 5 details, we don't need them listed 4 or 5 times with the date they worked it. What we want you to do is where it says dates worked, we want you to bookend the dates the officer worked. If in this case, at the example number 1 under Jane Smith, this officer worked from the 15th to the 2nd, and they worked a total of 50 hours. You will keep track of that and you'll put their total hours in there. The form automatically, you'll put the rate that the officer was paid, and the form will automatically calculate what the reimbursement is. One of the things that I want to mention is that you will when you filled out your worksheet, your enforcement strategy worksheet, you put an assumed amount of hourly rate to get that to work. You need to use the officer's actual overtime rate. Don't use the rate that you assumed. That was just to make sure that you had enough money to cover if you had all senior officers working. So the other option that you have to do, if you look at the second one, is for comp time. Some agencies, if you choose to allow your officers, the grant provides for compensation for that. You would need to put comp next to the officer's name, because if we were to do a check to make sure that, you know, all the officers got paid, and we would do a check on your payroll, we would say, well, wait a minute, Officer Jim Jones isn't on payroll. How do we know that that person got compensated for the, you know, for your claim? We would find the comp file and look that they got credited the time. Again, if the officer worked one day, you'll put the same date, both to and from. The only other thing that would change on that is that if an officer worked during a campaign and the payroll period happened halfway in between, and the officer received a COLA or a pay raise, and so they were paid the first two details at one rate and the second two details at a different one, then you would have two entries for that officer because there's two different pay rates. So that would be the only thing that you would split that on. The only other option with that also is that if the officer in the last example, if the officer split their reimbursement between overtime and comp time, then we would want two entries for that officer. And then you would put the dates that the officer took for comp time and the dates that they took for overtime. One of the other things that you'll find is that there's a chance that this campaign may run over two payroll periods. So an officer might work one detail. Turns out that they get paid for that, but then they get paid on the second payroll for the other details that they worked. We want you to use the second payroll date for everybody. So even though they got paid on the payroll date that would have occurred on the first, in this case, we still want you to use the 15th. Again, this is just a slide that details the information that I just gave to you. And again, if you have any questions with this, just contact your grant administrator and or LEL, and we'll be able to help to make sure that this gets filled out correctly. Primarily, you know, if you're looking with the claim, contact your grant administrator. They'll absolutely be able to help you with this. Again, add a reminder, you know, when you're filling out this as well as the 205, make sure the hours match. And then along this form, along with the 205, you got to check that certification box. Once you do an electronic signature, it's frozen so that if there's a change or mistake, you're going to have to redo it. Signature process is listed here. We're not going to go over everything with this. It is the preferred method that we would like to see, but on a chance that there's a problem with server, so, you know, there's any number of problems that could occur, you can submit a wet signature with the dates. The process for that basically is that you're going to print it out, you're going to sign it, scan it, and then send it in to the claim submission section that's listed. You're going to send that in to them. And then at that point, then it'll be able to be looked at. Again, when you do your signature, if you do a wet signature, you're going to have to make sure it's dated. Again, you want to save a copy of this. We would recommend that when you do your 205s, anytime that you send in any 205 reports, any claims, any emails to us like that, just blind copy yourself. Make sure you have a copy of that, because there is a chance that, you know, electronically stuff can go into the black hole of Gmail, and at least that way you've got a copy in case somebody can't find it. Again, we talk about saving everything. Form's going to lock. Just make sure that you get it sent to the claims, the BSPE claims. Claims go to claims, data goes to data. And again, here's your wet signature. If you're going to do that, if you end up doing it, we just want to make sure in your subject line, you put in the information as the example is, where it'd be your claim number or your project number, your agency name, which claim it is, and the amount of money. Once you put your claim in, whether it's electronic or otherwise, you should receive an automatic email generated back to you from BSPE claims. Should go back into your mailbox, letting you know that it's been received. If you do not receive this response, you need to contact your grant administrator, and that's the person listed in Exhibit C, and let them know, hey, you didn't get a response. They can double check and make sure that, in fact, it was submitted. And if it's not in the email box for the claims, then you can just end up resending it just to make sure you get it. We don't want it sitting there. Once they receive it, they're going to begin the process of going through your claim, making sure everything's right. If there's something that they see that's, out of line or that doesn't, they have questions on, they're going to reach out to you to discuss those issues. If your agency hasn't received payment in 60 days, we want you to contact your grant administrator for confirmation that it got processed, that it isn't sitting somewhere in the queue. Reimbursement basically takes between 4 and 6 weeks after the submittal. Usually it takes a week or so for the grant administrators to go over it and finance it to look through it. Once that's done and it's approved, it gets sent to the comptroller's office. So what you need to understand is that there are upwards of 300 grants total that get put in after these campaigns. And so if you get your grant put in right away, your claim should be sent to you probably within 2 weeks of when the comptroller gets it. Okay. If you're like 1 or 2 of 300, it'll be within the 2 weeks. If you're number 299 or 300, it's going to be closer to the 6 weeks before you get your reimbursement. One of the things that we found is that in some cases, your finance director will end up contacting you saying, hey, we haven't been paid for this claim. I would refer them to this comptroller website, give them the information. And in many cases, we found over the years that the finance people end up misidentifying the claim that's been put in for something like motor fuel tax or something. And so just, they should know to go to the comptroller's website, but that has solved a lot of problems so you don't get bothered by them for claims that have actually been reimbursed. So the last form that we're going to go on is the Bob's 2832. This is a financial reporting form from GATA. This form typically is due 30 days after the end of your last campaign. And what I mean by last campaign is the last campaign that you do. So if you're doing all 5 campaigns or you're doing one campaign, it's going to be due by 10/30 of 25. Now you can do it prior if you're only doing one campaign, which is the Memorial Day campaign. Once that's completed, you've got your claim done, you've got everything squared away. You could realistically do that in June. You don't have to wait till the end, but for most people, waiting until or getting it done by the 30th of October is going to be your drop dead date. You're going to need to get it in. An example of how to fill this out is listed and posted on the IDOT webpage. If you need any assistance with this, you can contact your grant administrator. They're very versed in this form. They know how to fill it out and help you with any of the questions that you have. The email report, we want you to email this report when you're done to the grant administrator. That's where this one goes. So 205 goes to data, 500 goes to claims. The Bob's report goes to your grant administrator. This is what the report looks like. Looks like there's a lot of information and things that you need to fill out, and you want to make sure it's correct. But this is what the form looks like. On the IDOT website is this. So this is what your example will look like. And you can see it here. It looks exactly like this for you to fill out. It gives you examples of where you can find it and what numbers need to go into where you're in different sections. The only thing that I want to bring your attention to is this, the performance in the alternative file database. Instead of you having to submit or upload a bunch of your forms that you completed, what you'll do is you'll check that box for alternative file or database. You'll make reference to the BSPE 205 and 500 rather than you having to upload or attach or put information in for all of those, especially if you're doing all 5 campaigns. Page 2 of the Bob's report, question 23 is going to ask you to check a box, one or the other. And so what you need to do is look at the explanation as to what would require you to check what box. This gives you the template. If you meet the one protocol or the other, that will direct you which box to check. And then subsequently, if you check the one box that said not all performance were accomplished, they're just going on a quick explanation of, why was it? Did you get weathered out? Did you, was there a staffing issue? Did something happen that didn't allow you to do that enforcement at all? Again, performance accomplished, same thing. Look at those protocols, and then you'll be able to do that. Again, you're going to need print to a PDF, allows for a digital signature, so you'll be all set with that. This is what the report, as you go on to further pages, this is an example of how that gets filled out. You would approve your approved budget in the personnel services, and then you would put the current period grant expense. Then the form automatically calculates how much remaining balance you have, any kind of post adjustments. And then a lot of this is done automatically. You don't have to worry about doing math with the percentages. So this is form submittal and due date, all on one page for you. So the mobilization data form is due 14 days after the end of the campaign, and you're going to send it to BSPE data. 500 is due 45 days after the end of the campaign, unless you are participating in the distracted driving campaign, in which case you have to have that submitted by November 3rd. If you are unable to get that submitted on time, the grant states that there's a chance that you would have to go to small claims court to go and get this. You'll get paid, but then it could take a long time for that process to work out, and your finance director is not going to be happy because they won't be able to close out their fiscal year because this will be hanging out there while you're waiting to get paid from court of claims. Your Bob's 2832, again, is due 30 days after the submittal. In this case, the final date is the 10/30/25. You'll email that to your grant administrator. We want you, again, your media releases, pre and post, need to be emailed to your grant administrator before your claim is processed. So typically, once you've completed and filled out that 205, it's probably a good time to do that post, put it out there, and then send that into your grant administrator with the press releases. So your file and records. So what do I have to do with all these things that we have? You are required to maintain your records for a total of 3 years from this year, from the date of submission or the final expenditure report. So 2025 plus 3 years. So you'll need to keep basically any of your paperwork, your grant, your reports, either digitally and or at a hard copy, all financial records to make sure that you comply with 2 CFR 200, which is the NHTSA requirement to have you keep the records. So just know that you can't just put it in a file. You need to put it somewhere where you can grab it right away. Again, this is a resource for you. IDOT website has, besides the forms, it has a bunch of resources, a bunch of information, PowerPoints on how to do things, stuff that's covered in this webinar. But from our perspective and our standpoint, there's a lot of stuff that's in here that you can refer back to. This, again, like Steve mentioned, this webinar, as well as different aspects are going to be posted on the different websites, the IDOT and the LEL, for reference for you. again, in between now and then, give your grant administrator a call, your LEL a call if you do have any questions once the LEL reaches out to you. Again, any questions at any time during this grant period this year, refer to your grant agreement, to those different sections. Read it first before you reach out, because you're probably going to find the answer to that question in your grant. Your grant agreement has all the pertinent grant related information, goals, objectives, and protocols listed in the exhibits A to E. If you have additional questions, by all means, reach out to us, call your grant administrator and law enforcement liaison. What's different about this grant is that you have a lot of help with this, that the grant administrators can help you. The law enforcement liaisons, we aren't Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. You can contact us and we'll get back to you after normal business hours. That you can contact us in the evening. We routinely will help out and assist project directors after hours. If you work the night shift, you're working midnights, and you come on at 11 o'clock at night, you can call us, just send us an email and we'll talk to you at 11 o'clock at night. Or in this case, today I talked with somebody at 5 a.m. So we will be there to answer your questions. You're not going to be boxed out. We'll get back to you pretty quickly. So with that, that is the presentation. I am going to try and see if we have any questions at this point. Okay. Still wait for my chat to come up. All right. So the first question that we have is, what if our payroll date is more than 2 weeks after the end of the campaign? You have 45 days to put in your claim. The 2-week period pertains to you putting in your data, which you should have after the end of the campaign. The law enforcement liaisons, we create it's not an official document. It's more of a value added activity sheet that mirrors the 205 for you to use to help gather your information and do that report. So when you meet with your law enforcement liaison, if you haven't gotten a activity sheet for your officers, ask for one and we'll be glad to provide you with that. But again, really we want you to try and get those claims in within 45 days after the end of the particular campaign that you're working on. It doesn't mean that if it turns out to be 50 days that you're not going to get paid. You will get paid. That's just to keep things current so that the last week of or that first week of November, that we don't get hit with all of your claims at once trying to process them. We want to get them as they're being completed. That just really helps out the grant administrators, IDOT, and us with that. All right, we have a couple more questions. The next one that we're going to deal with, it has to deal with the quota law. As you're all aware, the quota law is out there. And what we want to let you know is that there is an exemption within the quota law for officers that are doing grant work. You can require them to write tickets in compliance with the benchmarks listed in the grant. So what the law enforcement liaisons are going to do is we're going to send those out to you for our meetings so that you have that handy. Just in case anybody has any questions regarding that, you'll have the actual law in hand that deals with that. Next question is there any consideration for traffic, criminal, or DUI arrests regarding the ratios that they're looking for? And so basically, all of your benchmarks are going to be based on your raw numbers. And so I think where this question is going is that BSPE, they provide 2 hours of credit of time that you would spend processing, let's say, an impaired driving arrest. So obviously, how can you be out there doing enforcement and making contacts if you're processing a prisoner? So it's built into the process that you'll get 2 hours credit for impaired driving. But that's the only one that's listed in the grant that you'll get credit for. Now, there is a secondary review that's done by the law enforcement liaisons to see and adjust time credit for any traffic and criminal arrests as it would impact your ability to meet your benchmarks. So if you're meeting your benchmarks and you have all of the arrests in there and you're meeting them, it's not a problem. But for some reason, if you're not meeting that benchmark and you had a number of traffic and criminal arrests, the LELs can do a secondary review and say, yeah, you know what, once we factor that in there, you're meeting those benchmarks, and just know that that is going to be done to ensure that. So we don't want anybody letting somebody go because they're going to go, wait a minute, I got to go write a ticket. I'm going to let this person who's got a revoked DL, not that you would do that, but we don't want them considering that at all. Are there any poster examples available to hang around the PD, Village Hall, etc.? Not social media. There are things that are available. The LELs have some stuff that we could send to you, you know, basically that are traffic safety. What we would do is NHTSA has traffic safety marketing. If you put that into a Google search, it will take you to their national marketing, which has a bunch of posters, a bunch of different types of things that you could utilize that relate to the type of enforcement that you're doing, whether it's speed, distracted driving, impaired driving. So that would be a place that I would send people. Additionally, like I mentioned, IDOT and BSPE posts those templates. While they don't have necessarily posters, what you can get is talking points and social media hashtags that'll also be listed with the different types of media that they have available for you to use that you can incorporate and use in your public outreach. Can a grant officer assist a patrol officer on a call for service? So that question goes to supplementing versus supplanting. And this grant is designed, and all of the grants are designed to supplement staffing. So you cannot pay a grant officer to handle calls for service that the patrol officers or shift officers are handling. Now, it doesn't mean that the grant officer can't handle a call. They can, by all means. If they're out on patrol and they're a block away and there's a bank alarm, by all means, they better respond to it, be the first one to respond. Once they get there, and if they spend some time and they determine, that the rest of the officers get there to secure the scene, and then once it's secure, they could go back onto their grant duties. Any time that's spent helping patrol, if they're assisting an officer, say on a domestic, or there's a call for service where they got to say a home invasion and they're setting a perimeter, that time cannot be billed against the grant. They have to switch hats and they have to get paid for that time on department overtime, not grant time. So that's in that case, if you were an hour on a perimeter, in your 205, you would put down, hey, Officer Smith worked an hour on a call. Here's the call number for that. We did not put them in for that time. If you have a question with that, you can contact your LEL or grant administrator, and we'll be able to do that. The other thing that you can look at when it comes to officers working, here's another question. Can officers who are working on shift take leave time to work the grant, work a period of time, and then come back on to shift work? So the answer for that is maybe. And what I mean by that is that if your agency's policy allows officers who are working, if you have sufficient staffing to take comp time or vacation time or whatever, and then work a detail, whether it be the grant, or if they're going to be doing some other type of church detail where they're directing traffic, whatever it is. And then they can come back onto shift work. If they allow that, you can do it. But you can't do it if it's only the exception for the grant. So if all other circumstances say you can't do it, but for the grant, we're going to let you, that's not acceptable. It has to be across the board protocol for the agency. And let me see here, any more? All right, I think that's all I have. At this point, there's no more questions. The only thing that I would remind you is that over the next week or so, prior to the start of the grant, you should be receiving your executed uniform grant agreement. During that time, over the next week or so, your law enforcement liaison is going to be reaching out to you to complete this BSPE 26. In between that time, if you think of any questions, you can ask your law enforcement liaison, or for some reason, if they're not available, you can obviously put that question to your grant administrator. So with that, Steve, I will turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Scott. Again, thank you to everyone for joining in on this meeting. Hopefully it gave you a good basis on what's required for the mini enforcement grant starting May 16th. Again, as Scott mentioned, the grant agreements are being sent out. They started this week, so please keep an eye out on that and ensure that the authorizing rep is signing and returning the agreement, because we have our IDOT executive staff that will need to sign off on the grant agreement. And then once the IDOT grant agreement is signed off, then it is executed and you will receive a executed version of the grant agreement. So for your files. And so I just wanted to, you know, let you know once again that those are being sent out. So with that, again, I want to thank everyone and look forward to a good grant program here starting on May 16th. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.